It was early in the morning, and I woke up to the sound of Emma's cries. She was in the bed beside me, still in her pajamas, her small hands reaching for me. I rubbed my eyes, tired from the late night, but quickly got up to check on her. She was hungry, so I picked her up and held her close. Her warm little body always made me feel better, as if all the struggles in life didn't matter when I was with her. "Good morning, sweet girl," I whispered, kissing the top of her head. It was supposed to be a special day. It was my 20th birthday. I had hoped for a celebration, maybe even a small surprise, but the morning was already off to a stressful start. My parents weren't the type to celebrate birthdays with big events, but I had expected something more than what had been happening lately. I thought things were getting better, but I was wrong. Holding Emma in my arms, I tried to ignore the thoughts that were creeping in about my past and the mess my life had become. But of course, I couldn't. The weight of it all pressed down on me every day. It wasn't always like this. A few years ago, my life had been full of hope and dreams. I was going to college, studying literature and dreaming of becoming a writer. I had plans, but those plans had been shattered the moment I found out I was pregnant. The news had come out of nowhere, and my world changed forever. I remember how my parents reacted with anger, disappointment, and shame. My mother's cold words still echoed in my ears. "How could you do this to us?" she had asked. "You've ruined everything." That's when everything changed. I had hoped my parents would come around, but they never did. They didn't want a grandchild out of wedlock, especially a girl. Alyssa, my younger sister, was perfect in their eyes. She was popular, smart, and always followed the rules. She was the daughter they wanted, and I was just the disappointment. Still, it was hard to ignore the small pangs of jealousy I felt when I saw how they treated her, as if she could do no wrong. She didn't have to deal with the judgment that I did, and that was a bitter pill to swallow. Emma's father, Chris, was a distant memory. He had vanished the moment I told him about the pregnancy. At first, he acted like it was a mistake, something that could be easily erased. But I was the one who had to carry the weight of his actions. I had tried to move on, to focus on Emma and myself. But every now and then, I would think about Chris, and the anger would rise up again. He had left me alone to raise our daughter, and that betrayal stung more than anything. It felt like I was the only one paying the price. Life had been tough. I worked long hours at a local store just to pay for the bills, and during the day, I attended community college to finish my degree. It wasn't easy, but it was all I had. I tried to make it work, to create a life for Emma that she deserved. But sometimes, the exhaustion felt too much. My mother had taken care of Emma when I couldn't, but her help always came with a price. She never let me forget how much of a burden I was, always throwing in her words of criticism whenever she had the chance. "Why couldn't you be more like Alyssa?" she would say as she changed Emma's diaper, her voice dripping with disdain. I could feel the sting of those words deep inside me. They were a reminder of how much of a disappointment I was. It was like a curse that I couldn't escape, a constant reminder that no matter how hard I tried, I would never be good enough. I tried to block out her words, but they followed me everywhere. They echoed in my mind late at night, making it impossible to find peace. I had to escape. One morning, as I was feeding Emma, I heard something in my mother's voice that I had never heard before. Tension. It was different from her usual coldness. There was something urgent, something heavy in the air. I carried Emma downstairs, my heart beating faster with every step. My parents were sitting in the living room, their faces unreadable. Instead of breakfast, there were documents on the table, a clear sign that something wasn't right. I sat down slowly, Emma in my lap, feeling the weight of their gazes on me. I had no idea what was coming. "Jane, we need to talk," my mother started, her voice trembling. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. The words she was about to say would change everything. "It's about Alyssa," she continued, her hands shaking slightly. My heart skipped a beat. Alyssa? What could this be about? I had heard strange noises last night. Footsteps, hushed voices, crying. My parents were clearly hiding something. I looked at them, waiting for the bomb to drop. And then my mother said it. Alyssa's pregnant. I felt the room spin around me. It was all happening again. Alyssa, pregnant? She was only 18, just like me when I found out I was carrying Emma. It was a cruel twist of fate. My heart ached for my sister, but I couldn't help but feel a mix of anger and betrayal. How could she do this? And what would my parents do now? My mother's eyes glinted with something I couldn't quite place. She spoke again. "The father is Chris Baker." The name hit me like a slap. Chris Baker, the wealthy son of the local real estate mogul. Of course, Alyssa would get pregnant by someone like him. It was clear now. Alyssa's pregnancy wasn't a problem in my parents' eyes. It was a blessing. Chris was rich, and his family was well respected. The baby would carry the family name, and that was all my parents cared about. I was nothing more than a stain on their reputation. My parents' faces softened, their voices filled with excitement as they spoke of plans for the future. But I felt a sharp pain in my chest. Emma and I were nothing to them. They didn't see us as family anymore. We were just the burden they had to deal with. Then my father dropped the bombshell. "Alyssa and the baby will live here. Chris will join them too." It didn't even register in my mind at first. I was still processing the idea of Alyssa's pregnancy. But then it hit me. There was no room left in the house. My parents had already made up their minds, and Emma and I didn't fit into their new plans. "You and Emma need to leave," my father said, his voice cold. It was as if he were speaking to a stranger. My whole world shattered in that moment. I stood frozen, unable to speak. I looked at Emma, who had no idea what was happening. She was still smiling, holding her stuffed animal. She looked up at me with those innocent eyes, unaware of the storm that was brewing around us. "What do you mean we have to leave?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. My mother's response was chilling. "You're an unmarried mother. Emma is a girl. She doesn't carry the family name. We can't keep you here." It felt like a nightmare, but it was my reality. I was being kicked out, and there was nothing I could do. I tried to keep calm, to think clearly, but the shock of it all was too much. "How soon do we need to leave?" I asked, trying to hold back the tears. "Tomorrow," my father replied flatly. Tomorrow. The word echoed in my mind as if it were a death sentence. I had to get out, but where would we go? The world suddenly felt so much bigger, and Emma and I were so small in it. But something inside me sparked. This wasn't the end. I wouldn't let it be. By evening, I had packed our things. Every item I shoved into the boxes was a piece of my past, a piece of the life I once knew. I could feel the weight of the anger, the disappointment, and the sadness in every movement. But I also felt something else. Freedom. I wasn't going to stay where I wasn't wanted. As I loaded the last of our things into my aunt's car, my parents stood at the door, watching us leave without a word. They didn't even look at Emma. They just stood there, silent. It was as if they were sending us away for good. When we arrived at my aunt's house, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. This was my new beginning. My aunt greeted us with open arms, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe again. But as I sat down, holding Emma close, I opened my phone and saw the messages from my parents. They were desperate now. They wanted me back. But I couldn't go back to them. Not after everything they had done. I had finally found a place where Emma and I could be safe. And that was all that mattered now.